Hey everybody, welcome back. I am here. I'm not doing a full episode. I'm doing one of my quick little double clicks. So I want this to be like 8 minutes, maybe 10. I want to talk about something that has been on my mind all week long, and it's something to do with boys and their development. And it's a question that I feel like hasn't been asked properly, doesn't get attention, and I just want to ask it, okay? And put forth some hypotheses that I think are, my take on it, my, hypothesis based on everything I read and think about. But I'd be so curious to hear what you guys think. I know there's a lot of gentlemen listening to this, especially on YouTube. Ladies, I would love to hear what you think as well. But okay, here's the deal. Great podcast came out last week about the masculinity crisis. A large report came out from the UK called The Lost Boys that's all about, boys and men and what's going on with boys and men. And there's the resounding message that it's like boys are falling behind, men are falling behind. um, what are we going to do? And thankfully somebody is saying, what are we going to do? Some people don't really care, but the ones that do care, at least we're saying, what are we going to do? And there are two data points that I think are really interesting. So one of the things that we know is that boys develop their prefrontal cortex about 16 months later than girls. Okay, we know this to be true. And, the narrative in the media and all the conversations is kind of like, well, we should redshirt boys. We should start them a year later in school. We should do all of these different things. We should have more technical, trade schools for boys. And all of that might be true. They might be some solutions, but no one is saying, like, why would boys' prefrontal cortex develop 16 months later than girls? It's not random. It's not a defect, right? This is a evolutionary um, thing that exists within boys. It can't be there for no reason. It has to be serving a specific purpose. And I really think there's a really big purpose in that. And we're just ignoring it. And in that, we've kind of set up society, especially with when it comes to school in the Western world, right? In the way that like work goes on nowadays within the information age, like everything that's not blue collar, all of the things in that light are set up really to have girls thrive in those environments, right? Very individual, very orderly, follow the rules. Women we know are really agreeable. Girls are really agreeable. You watch a little girl play, she just sits there for hours on end, coloring in her little book and organizing all of her papers and pens, right? This is something that little girls do, but little boys don't do that. And why? We need to ask the question, why? Why would their prefrontal cortex develop later than girls? Upon learning and understanding what's been so important for thousands of years with boys, there is this sense that I think number one, my hypothesis is that they need to have more time to participate in risk-taking behavior. So, and that's because I think boys are much more suited to this like communal camaraderie, men, brotherhood, like raising each other together with elder men teaching them. Like boys thrive in that environment. And you can see it, like even just thinking about like old movies you've seen like about Troy or Sparta or whatever, you see the little girls kind of walking around with their moms or doing individual play or being alone or coloring or whatever it is that they're doing, playing by themselves with their dolls. Boys are like in the mix with other boys. They are admiring older men that are strong and tough. They are hanging on to every last word from their dad, right? They're hanging on to every last word from an elder man that's in the neighborhood or an older brother. I just think for male thriving, like for men to thrive, there's something that happens around these ages, like 5, 6, 7, where these boys have this incredible, desire to take risks. I know that one of the worst things that a little boy can experience is being bored. Like that feels like death to him. I've heard that so many times, and my little heart like goes out to him. It's like I don't want him to be bored. I want him to have this group of men. And I imagine that when that camaraderie is there, when that opportunity for taking risks without a coddling or overbearing mother around, right? When it's men leading boys and men know what boys need, so men can, you know, scan the perimeter and make sure that nothing is going wrong, but they create a much wider container for risk taking, right? There's so much more play available for those boys. I feel like something happens there where they test their strength and they, showcase what they're capable of, and they take insane risks that a much more developed prefrontal cortex wouldn't allow them to take. And that makes them better and stronger. And then when they're in this group of men, they can then become better. And then they continue to learn in a group in this very camaraderie like setting, and then they, graduate into manhood, they go for their rite of passage, and they're able to then be stronger than they would have been, with an earlier developed prefrontal cortex. Just my hypothesis, right? I feel that boys need men in such a massive way, like in such a massive way that it's you know, what is it, 75% of our elementary and middle school teachers are female. Like there's such a dearth of men leading boys. And I think there's something to that. Like, of course, evolutionarily, there would be a really important purpose for this to be true for boys, such that they could become successful, such that they could thrive, such that they could do, everything that they're meant to be doing and test themselves. I know boys love to feel how strong they are. And then as they get older, it continues. And I'm sure that's where it comes from. The second thing we know about boys is that their sense of attachment takes longer when they're infants and up until around 2 years old. So I've learned this from Dewey Freeman. I've heard this from other psychotherapists. It seems that the right side, the relational side of a boy's brain, just develops about a year and a half after a girl's does. So it's the same kind of thing with the prefrontal cortex. It feels like the vagus nerve. It just develops a little bit later. And so for example, if a girl is, fully secure and attached to her mother by around 2.5, a boy might not be fully secure until he's about 3.5. And so that extra time has to be there for a reason, right? We have to like imagine that this is not random and this is not a defect, right? I hate the narrative around like boys are behind. No, we're just not setting up our culture right now in a way that helps boys thrive, which is a disservice to boys, which is a disservice then to girls, right? Because if we don't both win, none of us win. And so I think there has to be something to that. And so what happens is when there's an attachment disruption, when a mother is neglectful or unattuned or not present or not loving or not unconditionally available to him, showing him her love, and this may be for a plethora of reasons. It may not just be because of her and what she's going through, but life circumstances and her partner's not there. And, men and women together, like this is not like one person's fault. The opportunity for pain and rupture and fragmented attachment, that wounding that happens during that early toddler time, there's a bigger chance for it to happen for boys, and then it lasts longer for boys, and then it becomes more painful for boys, and boys also then get older in our culture and don't have any way of relieving this, right? Because it's not been as socially acceptable. And so you think to yourself, oh wow, I can't believe that's happening for boys. Well, why would that be the case, that boys develop attachment a little bit longer? It takes them longer to develop it. I think it's probably because boys are going to become men. And if you think tribally, and if you think about, boys going on their rites of passage and figuring out how capable they are and having these like, vision quests out in nature by themselves where they could die and they need to really test their character. There's this extra Confidence or something. I'm like coming up with this on the fly because I want there's got to be a reason, and I'm this is again just a hypothesis, but like I'm so passionate about this because there's no way that this is a defect or it's random. Like this is, I'm sure, only to help boys, but it's almost like if we are, we have something like we buy a product, but we have an operating manual for a different product, we're not going to get this product to work. I think what's happening is like we have the product that is a boy, but we're trying to apply a different operating manual and trying to get the same result. And what it turns out to be is they're not falling in line with like the female way of doing things. No kidding, obviously. There's clearly so many important things that boys need that are different from girls. And so I imagine that having all that extra time with their mother and having that extra need to develop attachment, like I imagine it's all about creating a stronger sense of self and unconditional love between the mother and the boy, such that he is stronger and more capable to go do hard things because he's going to be doing way harder things than girls physically, right? And with his just necessity to be confident, to be sure of himself, to take risks, to do dangerous things for the good of everybody in the tribe, right? There's so much that is at stake and that he's going to be required to do that I imagine having that super, super secure attachment and it taking longer almost makes it stronger in that way. And he needs that. That boy needs that. And so if you think about like tribal societies and what happens there, mothers are so attuned to these boys and the girls as well, but like girls are not falling behind, right? And we're not having the conversation about girls. We're talking about boys and what's going on there and why we're not giving boys what they need. And they were so attuned to them. It's like the mother really leads the boy up until it's time for him to make his way into the men's side of the tribe. And so he's never worried about or concerned with whether his mother loves him. It's there, it's physical, it's chemical, it's there. And so, you know, with this weird cultural thing around, boys needing to become men, it's like we miss this entire first step of boys needing to be nurtured and loved and just unconditionally just poured into by their mother so that they develop that strong sense of self that will then have them go do hard things. And so I imagine it's for all of these reasons, the risk taking that is required, the camaraderie that is required of them later with men, the showing of their strength, the need for really, really strong, healthy, secure attachment with mom. All of this is setting boys up to then go and do all of these much more difficult things out in the world. And I think we're fundamentally doing such a disservice to boys and then girls and then men and then women by ignoring these things and ignoring these questions. And so these are my hypotheses. I wonder if there's more to it. I'm certain there is. I'm going to continue to research, but I would love to hear what y'all think in the comments about these two things, these two data points around prefrontal cortex and attachment taking longer for boys, and what you might think it's all about. Would love to hear you. So I've enjoyed this little double click. I hope you have too.